On May 31st, 1911, the Titanic was built. It was the biggest and greatest ship for its time. It was supposed to stay afloat for 2 to 3 days if crashed into, but we know that didn't happen. The Titanic sunk roughly 3 hours after the collision with the iceberg. Here I'll explain some of the flaws that caused the Titanic to sink as fast as it did. Here are some of the material flaws in the Titanic. When the Titanic collided with the iceberg, the hull steel and the wrought iron rivets failed because of the brittle fracture, a type of catastrophic failure in the structural materials. Brittle fracture occurs without prior plastic deformation and at extremely high speeds. The causes of brittle fracture include low temperature, high impact loading, and high sulfur content. On the night of the Titanic disaster, each of these three factors was present. The water temperature was below freezing, the Titanic was traveling at high speeds on impact, and the hull steel contained high levels of sulfur. When the iceberg tore through the hull plates, huge holes were created that allowed water to flood the hull of the ship. As a result, rivets not in the area of the contact with the iceberg were also subjected to incredible forces. Like a giant lever, the hull plates transferred the inward forces. The rivets were then either elongated or snapped into two, which broke the calculating along the seams and provided another inlet for the water to flood the ship. Along with the material flaws, poor design of the watertight compartments in the Titanic's lower section was a factor in the disaster. The lower section of the Titanic was divided into 16 major watertight compartments that could easily be sealed off if part of the hull was punctured and leaking water. After the collision with the iceberg, the hull portion
Sealing
of
off
6
the
of these
compartments was
16
completed
compartments
immediately
was
after
the
the
damage was realized. But as the bow of the ship began to pinch forward from the weight of the water in the area of the ship, the water in some of the compartments began to spill over into adjacent compartments. Although the compartments were called watertight, they were actually only watertight horizontally. Their tops were opened and the walls extended only a few feet above the waterline. These were two major engineering flaws that caused the Titanic to sink as fast as it did. If these two things were fixed, the Titanic could have stayed afloat long enough for another ship to come and save them.